Hello and welcome to the C3 Method Patreon Weekly Q&A with your host, Robert Poletic. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. So this is the weekly Q&A for Patreon for the week of June 16th. If you'd like to be able to submit questions for this Q&A video, you can do so by becoming a member on our Patreon service. You can go to patreon.com/C3method, and the 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method. There you go. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram on C3 Method. And if you want to go to our website to see what services we offer and find our podcast and all the other features, at c3method.com. Awesome. Let's get into this week's questions. As usual, we're going to start with nutrition. The first question is, what are your thoughts on the anabolic window for post-workout recovery and growth? This is a topic that is near and dear to me. So the anabolic window, if you don't know, it refers to the time frame after a workout. Most notably, anabolic window and the workout would be related to muscle growth. So you'll hear this term anabolic window in relation to muscle building, so bodybuilding, or if anyone's goal is building muscle, that's typically where you hear of the anabolic window. But we can also think of it as like a maximal recovery and adaptation window. And it's referring to the timing of when you have post-workout nutrition. And that nutrition might be whole food, it might be a protein shake. There's a lot of debate as to what is the best type of nutrition source post-workout, and then what is the right timing. And that's the window, is referring to how soon after the workout should you consume calories in order to promote optimal recovery and positive adaptation. The reason why I said it was near and dear to my heart is this is the topic I chose for my master's. When I was doing my master's in nutrition, we did a thesis, which was a culminating project after the whole time of doing the program, is I did a 50-page paper that included over 200 research articles, like peer-reviewed research articles, discussing this concept of the anabolic window. What are the right nutrients in regards to protein, and does carbs help, not help, fats help, not help? So how much protein, what type of protein, should we have carbs, should we not have carbs, should we have fats, should we not have fats, and then what is the right timing for after the workout? So there is the general answer, and then there's all the fun little nuancy specifics. The general answer is as soon after a workout that you can get protein into your system, the better. There are better sources of protein than others. In general, you would want something that digests as quickly as possible. And most commonly, that's going to be whey protein isolate is typically the best recommendation. So whey protein is spelled W-H-E-Y. It's a type of protein that you'll see like in protein powders and supplements. The other type would be casein protein, and it's more of a slower digesting protein. So you can think of as casein as slow digesting protein powder, whey as fast digesting protein powder, and whey isolate is referring to a filtration process in which the whey protein is made, and it gets rid of as many things as possible that can just that would get in the way of digestion, absorption, and utilization. So whey protein isolate would be considered the best source if you're going to do a protein source immediately after the workout. Now, the fun and complication of this is it does depend on what you've had to eat pre-workout, and if you had an intra-workout or not. That would then determine the need for a whey protein isolate protein powder post-workout, or if you can just do a whole food meal of still a relatively fast digesting protein source. So for example, if you had a pre-workout meal that had proteins that took, on average, say 3 to 6 hours to digest, and you had that 3 hours before the workout, then you're getting protein like releasing into your system. There's debate, and there's nuances about whether the body would actually have been digesting the protein from that meal during your workout, because the body does not prioritize digestion during the workout. So maybe that 3 to 6 hour window is actually delayed. So actually now you should have a 2-hour digestion protein source, but you want to have that. Make sure you only have it about, maybe 2 hours or 2.5 hours before the workout, not any longer, because then you actually have any protein in your system after the workout. And oh my gosh, it can get ridiculous when we start worrying about all these nuances. In the grand scheme of things, none of these things really matter much because there are so many more important elements. Whether we're having the right amount of calories within, like, say, a 24-hour cycle, so per day, is more important. Whether we're having the right amount of protein per day is more important. Whether we're doing that actually consistently from day to day is more important. Hydration would arguably be more important because that impacts performance and digestion quality. So what you already eat could be digesting better. Your performance could be better if you're properly hydrated, and then that helps you create a better stimulus from your workout, which makes a better adaptation. There are just so many things that matter before the anabolic window. My summary of what I do, like, for myself for the anabolic window is I have an intra-workout drink that is pure just whey isolate. I don't have any carbohydrates with it, but I do have carbohydrates pre-workout to help fuel performance. I do not worry about the carbohydrates intra-workout or post-workout in the way in which I work out because I don't value the increased digestion rate of the whey isolate over the added calories of the carbohydrates. My goal right now is leanness. So I would like to, maintain the muscle I have, build a little muscle for sure, but I want to get leaner. That's my current goal. If I was already as lean as I wanted to be, then heck yeah, I would have carbs post-workout to help shuttle the protein faster into my muscle cells, which does happen when you have a very fast-digesting carbohydrate source post-workout with the fast-digesting protein source. So it really would depend on, fat loss as your goal. If that's true, your main focus is going to be calorie allocation per day, making sure you're in a correct deficit to get the fat loss that you want. It might mean that your recovery is a little bit slow between workouts. Maybe you only get 85% of the possible muscle you could have gotten rather than 100%, but your main goal is to not lose the muscle. So as long as you're getting 85% net positive, you're not losing, so that's great. You're actually still gaining, but you're getting that fat loss that you want. So there's a lot of nuances to it, and I think at this point I've managed to display how confusing it can be. So I don't think I've simplified anything. I think I've just helped you better understand how confusing this is. In the grand scheme of things, we want to have some food in our body, some fuel in our machine before we work out. We want to stay hydrated during the workout, and then post-workout, get food in as quickly as you can so the body can start to recover and repair. So that's essentially the main focal points. Is before the workout, you're just trying to make sure you have some fuel in the system so the machine can run well. During the workout, you want to remain hydrated so the machine can run well. And then post-workout, you want to get some food in as quickly as you can so that way the machine can repair itself and run well the next time. So the timing of when you can eat would more so determine what you eat. Let's say, for example, I'm post-workout and it's going to be 2 or 3 hours before I can get a whole food meal in. I really wouldn't want to do my workout and then wait 2 or 3 hours to give my body anything to start to repair and recover with. I would want to get something in a little faster. So I could do a whey protein isolate. That's a quick, just a powder, mix a little bit with water, drink it, and you're done in 2 minutes, less than that. And then you have something in your system, and then you can get to your whole food meal 2 or 3 hours later. If you can get a whole food meal in right afterwards, then I would focus more on faster digesting proteins. There's no point in having like a steak post-workout because that can take 12 or more hours to actually start to digest and be available to the body. So we want to focus on lean proteins, and that can be protein powder. It can be things like eggs, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, white fish, lean meats. If you have like a really lean turkey, beef, ham, chicken, anything like that. Just really lean and fast digesting protein sources. So you can do a quick, simple Google search and just say, what are fast digesting protein sources? And then it gives you a list. And then for that list, you could say, how long does it take, or what protein sources digest in under 2 hours? There you go. And then it will give you a list and pick anything from there. So that would be a way to think through it. Typically, we want to avoid fats post-workout because fats are very slow digesting. They would slow down the digestion of the protein. You can pair carbs post-workout if you would like, if your goal isn't fat loss and or even if your goal is fat loss, but you have the calorie allowance for it, sure. Carbohydrates, when they're simple carbohydrates, very fast digesting carbohydrates, they do help shuttle the protein a little bit faster into the muscle cells, but it's not significant enough that if your goal is fat loss, I wouldn't lose the goal of fat loss by adding in the post-workout carbs, and then maybe your calories are too high for the day, and or you have to starve yourself at some other portion of the day to make your calorie requirements. So if your goal is fat loss, just get in a protein source. If your goal is anything other than fat loss, then a little bit of carbohydrates post-workout will help. And the faster digesting, the better. So that way you can get the protein in your system as quickly as possible. The exact amounts, that's a whole nother, nuance there. Typically what I would think of is the way I structure it for clients is if we think of the daily amount of protein that we need, so how much we need per 24 hours, I then have my clients break that down into 3 sections of the day. So we know that you're going to be asleep for 6 to 8 hours, roughly. That means we're awake for 16 to 18 hours of the day. If we divide that into 3 sections of the day, it's roughly the first 5 to 6 hours of the day is the first 1/3 of your day. The next 5 to 6 hours is the middle third, and then the final 5 to 6 hours is the final 1/3 of the day. If we have our total protein goal, let's say our goal is 150 grams. Well, I want to have 50 grams in the first 1/3 of the day, 50 grams in the middle third of the day, and then 50 grams by the final third of the day. And then within each of those windows, where do I work out? If I work out in the morning, well, then I know my goal is 50 grams of protein in the first 5 to 6 hours. So if I'm going to work out, a part of the 50 grams of protein should come from a fast digesting protein source after my workout. If I work out in the middle of the day, it's the same thing. It just comes from part of that 50 grams. So you can figure out how much protein you should have post-workout by just making sure that it fits into each 1/3 of the day, depending on whatever your total daily goal is. So again, if you were allocated, say, 50 grams of protein in that final 1/3 of the day, and that's when you work out, you would just have enough protein post-workout, depending on what you had pre-workout, to make sure you met that 50 grams of protein goal for that 1/3 of the day. It might sound complicated because I'm having to explain everything, but if you saw it on paper, if you practiced it for a couple days, it's much easier to structure your day with this thirds concept, and then just focusing on the amount of protein you would have per third, and total calories per third as well. We divide our calories by 3 and kind of break those down into each third. And that kind of gives you an idea of how much protein you should have and then how many carbohydrates you should have. If you have any more in-depth questions about this, we do offer, one-on-one nutrition coaching as a service. So if you're interested in that, just reach out on our website, www.c3method.com, and I can help you kind of set this structure up specific to your numbers, your needs, your food preferences, and your schedule. And then that'll give you an idea of how this would best work for you, and then you can kind of run that on your own. So the anabolic window is a thing. It is good to get protein in as quickly as we can post-workout. It helps us recover faster. It helps us get a better amount of muscle growth out of that time frame when the body is most responsive to repairing and growing muscle tissue. Cool. Next question we have. In one of your recent podcasts, I'm sorry, I'll read it. I'll start that again. In one of your recent podcasts, you mentioned the negatives of fasted cardio and or exercise. So fasted cardio, fasted exercise. However, I was watching a day in the life video of a professional bodybuilder, and he said that he does fasted cardio every morning, even in his off season, in order to boost daily hunger and increase his fluid intake. I understand that most things in life come with pros and cons. Well, hell yeah, okay. Woo! I'm glad we're starting there. I was wondering if my goal is to build muscle while staying as lean as possible and doing so in the healthiest way for longevity. Those are fun to balance. Do you think the pros and cons balance would favor fasted cardio, or would you still be opposed to it? Awesome. Fun question. There's a lot. Let's start through some of it, and then I'll go through the rest of it as it comes up in my mind. If we're looking at a professional bodybuilder, most commonly we're going to be looking at somebody who's taking exogenous testosterone and other hormonal support. So they are protecting their hormones with outside of the body hormonal support. Meaning, steroids, whatever you want to call it. Steroids is a ridiculously broad term for this, but there is hormonal support. And this is like TRT, if somebody's taking testosterone replacement therapy, and that could be for women or men, they might be taking hormonal replacement therapy, so HRT, whatever. If we're taking hormonal support that comes from outside of our body, fasted cardio doesn't have as much of a negative impact. Part of the reason why fasted cardio does have a negative impact is its negative impact on our natural hormone production. And this would be related to the intensity and duration of the cardio. If you're talking about just 20 minutes on a 5% incline on a treadmill for a walking pace, you're just existing. That's not really actually exercise. There's plenty to unpack with what I'm about to say. But I've taught a lot of community classes on nutrition, and often people ask about exercise, and one of the things they'll ask is about walking. And walking is just a human function. It's something that our bodies can do. And for a certain amount of steps per day, really walking is just existing. Like if I'm going to get up off the couch and walk to, the bathroom, and then I go to the bathroom, and then I walk back to the couch and sit down to watch TV, I didn't exercise. Walking to the bathroom and back was not exercise. Walking within normal lifetime, life activities, really isn't exercise, meaning that it's not placing our body in some crazy stressful state. Now, if somebody's out of shape, they're overweight, or they have some kind of, special individual condition, that is extremely strenuous and miserable for them to do, then yes, that's going to be exercise, because it's going to elevate their heart rate. It's going to place stress on the body, which will start to increase cortisol. It's basically what determines whether something's exercise or not is how our body responds to it. If our body responds by feeling stressed, then we could say that is exercise. Exercise is voluntary stress. So we are putting our body under physical stress voluntarily, and the degree of stress that we create kind of dictates whether that exercise was moderate or intense. The reason why I'm saying all of that is the fasted cardio, the impact that it has on the pros and cons list, the con side, the cons of fasted cardio are related to the stress that it creates for the body. So if this person wakes up and they just walk casually for 20 minutes, get a really light sweat, they can talk the whole time they're doing it. They're not really so out of breath they can't talk. Maybe they're talking to the camera, taking a couple deep breaths, light sweat. But overall, it's like, they didn't get their body in that much stress. It's not going to have much of a negative impact on hormones. The body's not going to feel so insanely stressed and overworked that all of a sudden it can't produce its normal testosterone and estrogen or growth hormone. It's not going to feel so stressed and overworked that it starts to ramp up cortisol production, which is very negative for fat loss and sleep quality and anxiety and stress. So if it's a light form of cardio, and for them, that reminds them, it kind of gets them thirsty. They start drinking a little bit of fluid at the beginning of the day, and then that gives them in a good rhythm to get, by the end of the day, all the water they need. So especially professional bodybuilders, the bigger the person is, the more muscle tissue they have, the more fluid they need. So they might need, upwards of over 1 gallon of fluid a day, 1.5 gallons, maybe even 2 gallons a day. So for them to get to that amount by the end of the day, they got to start early. And if one of the ways for them to start early is a low intensity fasted cardio, then they could do that. One of the things to note, though, is whether that's fasted or not doesn't matter. It's just whether it made them thirsty. So they might be doing it fasted, but that's not necessary. They could be doing a protein shake beforehand. They could have had breakfast beforehand. The fasted component isn't necessary for the thirst. So if you want to do cardio to create thirst, to help you drink more fluid, it doesn't have to be fasted. You just have to do cardio, do something that makes you thirsty. The other thing you said was that they were saying they do it in the off season in order to help boost daily hunger. So if this is a professional bodybuilder, one of the hardest things as a professional bodybuilder is eating how much food you need. Even amateurs that I work with, like people who are competitive, they're trying to put on muscle tissue. They struggle often to eat as much as they need to. It would be easy if we could get the calories through pizza and ice cream, but we can't. We got to get the calories through healthy foods that match our digestion needs, our the right quality of foods to stay lean while giving us the nutrients we need to build muscle tissue and optimize our kind of protein synthesis process, muscle building process. So those foods tend to be pretty hard to eat. If we think of basic example of chicken and rice, it's really hard to eat a lot of calories of chicken and rice. So if they're doing cardio in the morning to boost hunger, then great if that helps them. But another thing to kind of note is it didn't need to be fasted. Actually, fasted is counter to their goal. Maybe they could get up in the morning and have some type of protein and greens shake, or protein and carbs, or even some protein and like moderate fats. And that gets calories in their face. They then go for the cardio. The cardio produces a little bit of hunger because now all of a sudden they're using more calories, especially if they're at a high body weight. The walking, even at a low intensity, can burn a significant amount of calories, several hundred calories, depending on the length of their walk, the duration of the walk. And it's getting them that thirst production. So the concept of doing cardio in the morning is what's helping them with hunger and thirst, not that it's fasted. It doesn't need to be fasted. So if you're looking for those benefits, you can do that fasted or not fasted. And I would argue that it doesn't need to be fasted, so don't do it fasted. The issue with fasted workouts in cardio as the intensity grows. So if somebody does a fasted like weight training session, or they do fasted really high interval, high intensity type training, and we're talking about 30 or more minutes, you're going to start to really produce a ton of cortisol, which limits fat loss during the day. And it can have a negative sleep impact, negative mood impact, negative daily energy impact. There's a lot of negatives to that. Then they're also waking up from a fasted state. They've been sleeping for, say, at least 6 hours. Like whatever they had for dinner the night before is probably gone. So their machine is empty. No fuel, no oil. It's just empty. And then they get up and they do all this activity that demands a whole bunch from the body and stresses the hell out of the body. They're digging themselves in a recovery hole at the very beginning of the day. Then whatever they have for breakfast hopefully can get them somewhat out of the hole. And then between breakfast and the next meal, they're digging more of a hole because they're up and active and doing things. And then hopefully by lunch, they can dig themselves out of that hole a little bit more. So usually what ends up happening is the whole day the person is spent eating food, trying to get to just baseline recovery. So if they woke up at, say, a baseline of 0, they exercised and beat themselves up to a point of -5 recovery. They have to catch up to 0 and then eat above that to get positive adaptations. We don't get stronger. We don't get bigger muscles. We don't get better endurance by going from -5 to 0. It's what we get above 0. So when somebody does fasted high-intensity exercise in the morning, they end up spending the whole day barely getting to baseline. So then the next day they train, they've maybe just made it back to the baseline recovery. They've never made positive adaptation. And this is why people will train for years and make really no significant difference, because they're spending their whole time catching up to 0. And that's what we want to avoid. If we do have some food, whether that's whole food, powders, drinks, whatever, pre-workout, it gives our body a little bit of something to mitigate some of that stress during the workout. So instead of ending the workout at -5, I only ended at -2 or 3. Now, breakfast puts me to 0. Lunch starts to put me at +1 or 2. Maybe by dinner I'm at +2 or 3. And then by the next day, I've now made 2 or 3 units of progression rather than fighting the whole time to get back to 0. So that is the pros and cons in a short way of the fasted cardio or fasted exercise. Is if you do it fasted in the morning and it's high intensity, you're going to spend your whole life getting back to 0. We don't want that. That sounds miserable, and it is. We don't want to spend our whole life doing a whole bunch of effort to get nothing from it, just to maintain or sustain where we are. We want to improve. If you want to improve, you want to get some food in before your workout, so that way your body can mitigate some of the stress of the workout, and then it gives you a better chance to not only get out of the recovery needs, but get into the adaptation amounts of recovery. So that's what we're really looking for. So hopefully that was helpful. If your goal is to build muscle and stay lean and be healthy, then pre-workout nutrition is extremely important, because you think about health, it mitigates inflammation by having food beforehand. It mitigates cortisol production, which is a negative health hormone. There's a lot of negative things health-wise about fasted exercise, high-intensity fasted exercise. So having something beforehand not only helps the muscle growth, it does help fat loss because it keeps cortisol levels low, and it will help longevity because it helps reduce inflammation, reduce joint stress. It helps actually repair the joints better over time. So you're just going to have a better, well-run machine. Nobody would run a machine, without any oil in it. Our bodies will run without fuel, which stinks, because it causes a lot of negative components to us. It's helpful in some ways for fat loss in certain conditions and blah, blah, blah. But in a sense, we would never run a machine without having proper fuel and oil in it. If you want the machine to run the longest as possible, you would do regular maintenance, correct? So we want to do regular maintenance for our body. Fasting is not regular maintenance. That's ignoring your body and not giving it what it needs. Cool. Next question we have is training. If I'm doing cardio to burn body fat, is it true that I should focus on zone 2 cardio to optimize fat being burned for fuel, as opposed to using carbohydrates as the main fuel source? Okay, so when I used to teach at the university level, I taught for over 7 years. I taught exercise physiology labs and weight training classes and all that fun stuff. We did do testing on treadmills for athletes, where you could actually test and see the fuel source that the person was using at what level of intensity of cardio. So really fun stuff. And you could see that at certain heart rates, so beats per minute, there's a certain level of intensity that the body can sustain the activity, but it'll use a higher percentage of fat compared to carbohydrates than at other intensities. This gets misconstrued all the time as being the best way to use cardio for fat loss. The better answer is, if you're using cardio for fat loss, you've already made a mistake. So we should not use cardio for fat loss. Let me clean that up a little bit. But cardio for fat loss is insanely inefficient. Insanely inefficient. It is much, 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 much more efficient to track our calories and ensure that we have a caloric deficit that is needed to match the rate of fat loss that we want. And then our daily activity, meaning exercise or walking, step count, whatever. Well, step count is very similar to zone 2 cardio, because zone 2 cardio is a very moderate intensity level. So walking at a brisk pace for most people will put them at zone 2 cardio. If you're more physically fit, you might have to get into a low jog. But for most people, a brisk walk will put them in zone 2 cardio. You just don't burn a lot of calories. I mean, you can walk for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and maybe burn 150, 250 calories, depending on your body weight. You can actually go online and do a calories burned calculator search, and then type in walking, type in brisk, say 2.8 or 3 miles an hour, and type in your body weight, and it'll tell you how many calories you burn in a given amount of time, say 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. It's depressingly low. It's very low. We do not burn a lot of calories through walking. and that would be related to zone 2 cardio. We don't burn a lot of calories through zone 2 cardio. So it's better to monitor our nutrition, how much we're eating, to match the caloric deficit we need. And then if we do extra activity like weight training, or if we do zone 2 cardio type walking or extra, you can just use that as like an extra insurance for more fat loss that day. Maybe you only have to eat into like a 300 calorie deficit, but you can burn 150 calories through walking. So really your net calorie deficit is 450. But that's not highly accurate either, because every single day changes a little bit about how active we are, inactive we are, how many step counts we get like outside of our exercise. So maybe you had a very busy day and you had 5,000 steps, and then you went for a walk and the walk was 3,000 steps, and you count your 3,000 steps as your zone 2 cardio. But maybe you had another day where you're sitting answering emails all day and you didn't even make 1,000 step count by the end of the day, but you went for your walk and you got your 3,000 steps in. Well, that's actually only 4,000 that day. So you would think like, oh, on both days I had my 3,000 step count exercise. Yeah, but there's an enormous difference when we're active versus inactive in other ways that would influence how much of a calorie deficit we're actually in. You could even get more nuanced and talk about thermic effect of food. And certain foods require more calories to break down than other foods. So if you had a day of eating oats, sweet potatoes, and more high thermic effect of foods, but then the next day you ate very low thermic effect of foods, your calorie difference can be different even if it doesn't show up on, like say, a calorie tracker. There are a lot of variances and kind of quote unquote uncontrollables. It's not uncontrollables as much as just unawares. We're unaware of certain things that can vary from day to day to day to day to day. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't track anything and we're all doomed. It just means that track what we can and don't overcomplicate things, and aim for consistency over time as the driver for progress rather than nuanced numbers every single day. What I find is that people who typically tend to over-focus on daily numbers tend to then have horrible trending consistency over time. So they'll be like, oh, I hit this day or I didn't hit this day or this day or this day. But then when you look over the string of days, they have insanely highs and lows. Whereas if you look at people and they're like, hey, I'm just going to track these 2 or 3 things. I'm going to do that every single day, and I'm going to do that for 2 months. They tend to do way better. They're much more consistent. So if we're looking at zone 2 cardio for fat loss, it really doesn't matter much whether it's zone 2, zone 1, zone 3, zone 77, whatever. I would control your caloric intake via food and make sure you have a deficit that you want as like the minimum amount of deficit, and then use exercise as you can to kind of push the deficits on extra days if you can from there. So the calories burned during exercise is more important than whether the calories came from fats or carbs. And most notably is because anytime you would eat in excess, your body's going to replace whatever was lost anyhow for body fat, whether it does that via carbs or fats. There's tracers and research they've done that can prove that the majority of dietary body fat, it comes from dietary fat, but then it's the amount of carbohydrates you have that spare the dietary fat to be stored or not. So both carbs and fats come into play when you think about burning body fat and whether that body fat is then replaced. So calories burned per exercise, like regardless of the intensity, regardless of the fuel source used, is more important to be tracking as part of a daily deficit rather than whether you're utilizing specifically carbs versus fats during that exercise. Okay, a lot of detail in there, but hopefully that was helpful. Next question. I'm getting ready to change my training focus from strength and muscle mass to maintaining my strength but pushing harder into fat loss. I have been following your functional athleticism program, workout structure. I was wondering what changes, if any, you would make from that structure if you were switching from strength and mass to strength and fat loss. In general, so it's most helpful for everybody watching this video, there isn't much change that I make in clients' programs, whether we're switching from a period of time of growth into a period of time of fat loss. Part of the reason why is what you did to grow muscle is usually a really good thing to do to maintain muscle. Some of the variance, though, is maybe we'll use a little more supersets and circuits than we used to, but we wouldn't want to be so out of breath and doing so many more movements that now I can't maintain the weight that I would typically perform on the movements. So for example, let's just make a basic workout for the auditory and if you're watching this on YouTube, visual purpose of what I'm talking about. Let's say you're doing so it's functional athleticism. You do some warm-ups, maybe you do squats and walking lunges and pull-ups. There you go. So functional athleticism. So squats, walking lunges, and pull-ups. When you're focusing on strength and mass and you're not really caring about fat loss, hopefully your nutrition is set up to where you're not gaining a bunch of unnecessary fat. So you're eating around maintenance, slight surplus. You might do the squats on their own with like 3 to 5 minute breaks so you can really maximize the weight load that you can use during those sets. Then you do the walking lunges. Maybe you do those on your own because you're out of breath and you're still recovering from the squats. And then you do the pull-ups. When we get into fat loss, maybe we would do the squats on their own, but then superset the pull-ups and the lunges. And that allows us to get a little bit of a higher intensity out of that same workload. And that can promote a little bit more of a caloric burn. But similar to the question with cardio, zone 2 cardio, we're not really looking to burn calories in our workouts. What we're looking to do in our workouts is to stimulate strength, stimulate muscle, so that way our body maintains strength and maintains muscle while we eat in a caloric deficit. So if our goal is fat loss, I'm going to eat in a deficit, not train to create the deficit. There's a difference. I'm going to eat for the deficit, not train for the deficit. So then my training focus is how can I maintain intensity and weight loads as best as I possibly can to maintain strength and muscle mass while I'm in a deficit. So really the nutrition is what changes. It drives whether we're increasing strength and mass, maybe we have a slight surplus, and it drives fat loss. So it drives the use of body fat as fuel, but our training is maintaining the strength that we have and the muscle that we have. So we still want to use strength building and muscle building structures in our training, because if that's what built it, that's what's going to keep it. One of the biggest mistakes people can make is to start to change their training into lighter weight loads and just higher reps. What happens then is you certainly lose strength expression. You're going to then lose a little bit of the neurological, like CNS strength-based. So things that used to feel heavy, used to not feel heavy, are now going to start to feel really heavy as you get further and further away from performing them. So we want to maintain weight loads. We want to maintain our typical intensities as much as we can, and then just eat in a deficit to create the fat loss. So I don't change much in training. One of the things that would be a consideration, though, is if you do have to get into what would be considered a significant caloric deficit, you may then be limiting your recovery. So maybe you're not fully optimally recovering between workouts. So maybe my RPEs, my rate of perceived exertion, the rate of how intense the movements feel, I might be a little more cautious. So previously when I'm eating in a caloric surplus, maybe I'll train to a 9 RPE or even a 10 RPE on some major movements. Whereas when I'm in a calorie deficit and I'm driving fat loss, I might want to train to maybe only like an 8 RPE, just to save a little bit of stress on my connective tissue and stay a little bit away from whether things were really good or injured. So we might not want to get to that edge of being injured as close to that edge. We might want to be a little more cautious when we're in a calorie deficit. I still want to lift heavy things. I still want to be intense in my training. But it's really the calories that are going to change, so the way we eat changes. And then in our training, I might want to be a little more cautious, knowing that my recovery might be a little less than optimal. So there isn't much I would change in this training structure. I would just maybe back off the 9 and 10 RPEs and be a little more controlled and stay with 8 RPEs. And if you're worried, oh my gosh, am I doing enough? Just add an extra working set. So stay around a 7-8 RPE and then add an extra working set, and then I can kind of mitigate a smidge of a reduction in intensity by adding a smidge of volume. Cool. Next question we have is, how can I improve my sleep quality? Woof, there's a ton. Okay, typically the best piece of advice, the thing you'll hear most commonly, sleep quality is something I've looked into a lot. I have had a lot of sleeping issues related to throat surgeries and a throat condition that I have had since birth. So I have very limited sleep positions, and then I've had a lot of sleep issues with another throat condition which related to inflammation in my throat and made breathing very hard. So I've had a lot of sleep apnea issues and concerns. So I've looked a lot into this, listened to a lot of podcasts, listened to a lot of books. The most common thing you'll hear is to go to bed at the same time every night. Whether you wake up or not at the same time doesn't really matter as much as going to bed at the same time does. So if you have the routine of going to bed at, say, at 10 p.m., try to do that all the time, every time. Now, you might not feel tired at 10 p.m., but get into bed anyhow. What you can do, one of the little tricks I have for that is don't use a visual stimulus. So don't get into bed and watch your phone, Netflix or YouTube or whatever the heck. You can use an auditory stimulus. So I will maybe put a podcast on, or I listen to sometimes sermons at night. It's just a nice, happy, peaceful thing to go to bed. So it just kind of depends on whatever doesn't rile you up. Don't listen to something that fires you up and makes you mad or anything. Listen to something that's semi-interesting that you want to learn about. And just put that in, like an earplug or, earbud if you have a partner in bed and they don't want to listen to that. Or if you're by yourself, you can, full blast, whatever you want. But if you listen to something, close your eyes. And assuming the room is also, I'll get into this in a second, in the right environment. But just having an auditory stimulus doesn't keep you awake as much. You'll pretty much pass out much quicker than you think you would. Whereas if you're watching something, you'll say, oh, I'm not quite tired yet. I'm not quite tired yet. No shit. Like you're doing something that's keeping your attention and keeping your body up and working and moving. So it's like walking to get tired. Like if you keep walking, you're not going to fall asleep. But if you walk for a while, then you sit down, you're going to fall asleep. So if you just keep using your brain and watching this stimulus and watching, you're going to not feel like you're tired. So get rid of a visual stimulus, use an auditory stimulus, and just lay in bed at the same time every night. That'll help a lot. Now, the environment in which you want to go to bed. You do want to have the temperature a little bit lower than, like, say, this is going to sound funny, have the temperature a little lower than room temperature. So whatever a normal temperature for you is, when it's not hot, it's not cool, just normal, have it a little cooler than that. Studies have shown that actually helps us fall asleep. When our body temperature starts to come down a little bit, our body kind of in a sense like hibernates. It's triggered to hibernate, so it's triggered to fall asleep. And that will help. You also want to have as few or as consistent of noises and sounds and stimuli as possible. So you'll hear people use like sound machines because it's a nice consistent white noise, just a nice and consistent. Rather than having no noise, but then you hear creaks and cracks and maybe city noises. So you want to have something that makes the noise consistent. That'll help. Get rid of light. Our skin is actually sensitive to light. You can actually see light through your eyelids. So you want to get rid of light. That's a reduction of another stimulus. So those are basically the main things. You want to have a light cover over your skin as well. So we have a lot of little like hairs on our body. Women too have a lot of little hairs in their body, and those will pick up changes in air current, and that's again another stimulus. So if you put a light cover on, that will help dull the sensitivity of the skin, and that's again one less stimuli keeping us awake. So those are a couple things we can do. Another thing you can think about is reducing stimulus before you get into bed. So if you're just, high flying, crazy, then lay into bed and try to calm down, that's a fast turnaround. So you can start, 30 minutes before bed, maybe bringing the lights in the house down. Maybe, calming things down. Maybe do a sitting activity rather than a standing activity. There's a lot of things to just kind of think of ramping yourself down, like reducing stimulus as you get closer and closer to when you go to bed. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I was younger, two mistakes, is number one is when I had stuff to do, I would stay up late to get it done and then wake up in the morning. Horrible decision. So now what I do is I go to bed when I normally should go to bed and I get up early if I need to. So if I need to do something like work-wise or whatever, I'll get up at 4 a.m. Maybe I'll go to bed at 10 if that's my normal bedtime, 10. I'll get up at 4 to get stuff done rather than getting up at 6 at my normal time. So I don't stay up late to get things done. I wake up early to get things done. And that has a much less negative impact on our circadian rhythm, our sleep rhythm. So you'll actually have much better quality of sleep by sleeping shorter rather than going to bed later. Then the second thing was, when I felt overwhelmed and stressed in life, I will often have this urge to stay up late as a way to have decompression and low stimulus. We also can refer to that as me time. So just whenever the world finally leaves you the hell alone and you can just relax. Often people will stay up late because they have that moment of relaxation. Well, you can choose to stay up later than the world. So you're going to stay awake longer than the world does, and that gives you your window of time. Or you can go to bed early and wake up before the world does. So you can either stay awake longer than the world and then get your quiet time, or you can wake up before the world and get your quiet time. That's a much better alternative. So that's actually what Meredith and I do, and thankfully she did it before we met and I did it before we met, so we just kind of bonded that habit together, is we get up before the world gets up, and then that gives us our me time, that gives us our time to focus on whatever we want to do that gives us like a low stimulus, kind of a self-growth moment. So sometimes I'll wake up early and do a workout. Sometimes I'll wake up early and get some work done because then I have lower anxiety throughout the day because I already know that's done. Sometimes we'll get up early and we'll just snuggle on the couch with our dog and watch some random thing on TV. And that's just a nice quiet time. So what you do at that time doesn't really matter, but what you'll find is if you're staying up late to have that low stimulus, the world leaves me alone time, that's going to negatively impact your sleep quality. So instead of staying up late to have that, wake up early to have that. Cool. And then our last question is a business question. I struggle with how to promote myself online as a trainer. I have a decent physique, but I'm not the biggest or leanest. I'm decently strong, but I'm not the strongest. How can you present yourself online to get clients when you're not, quote unquote, great at any specific aspect? I want to build my brand to help my business grow, but I don't know what to focus my brand on. Okay, good question. If your goal is to be the strongest, there's really only one person that gets to say that. If your goal is to be the fastest, there's really only one person that gets to say that. So it can be very challenging if you believe that you need to be the best at something, and then that is what your brand is. The people who are the best at something don't get to stay the best forever, unfortunately, but they can at least claim they had the best at one point. But that's a very small percentage of the crowd. And then also, a large percentage of the people who are the best at something don't know how they got there because they hired a coach. And the coach told them what to do and they just followed it. So even if somebody is the best at something, it certainly does not mean that they can make you the best at it as well. So I wouldn't worry about whether you're the best or not. When you're thinking about a personal brand, what I tell my training clients is, if we focus on it this way, this might help you start to generate some ideas. What have you done that maybe 5 or 10 years ago you didn't know you could do? So in the last 5 to 10 years, what have you done that you're proud of? What have you done that when you look at it, you're like, oh man, that was really successful. That was cool that I could do that. I didn't think I could do that. I didn't know I could do that. This is pretty badass. I'm very happy of this. I'm very proud of this. So likely in the last, even if you go back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, depending on what your age is, there's likely something you've done that when you look back at it, you were proud of it. That's also commonly going to be related to something that built or developed a skill set out of you that you didn't have prior to that event. So let's say, for example, you set a goal for yourself and you're like, I'm going to work out every day, maybe for 3 months in a row. So 90 days. I'm going to work out every day for 90 days. And during that time, there were days it was really hard. There were days you had to wake up early to make sure you got it in, stay up late to make sure you got it in. There were days it was crazy stressful and maybe you're doing push-ups in a hallway just to make sure you got something in. But somehow you made it through, you trained every day for 90 days. That can be something you're proud of. And often you're going to be proud of it because it was a struggle. It was a challenge. It was something that challenged who you were and helped you become better in some way. There was a new skill set developed, a new mindset unlocked. There was something new after that that you didn't have before that. If you think of that, if you can identify 1, 2, or 3 things like that for you, that then can become what you can help others do. So if you had to develop the ability to be consistent with exercise, that's a pretty damn good skill. And a lot of people need that. A lot of people struggle with consistency with exercise. A lot of people struggle with consistency with nutrition. So maybe you had ways in which you applied it to exercise. But if you think through it, you can say, oh, wow, if I take this concept, I can become more consistent with my nutrition. Maybe I can even become more consistent with finances, with relationships, with other aspects of life. So now you have this thing that you did, this skill that you developed, or this mindset you developed, and then that can become your brand. That can become what you help others do. Because there will be other people who haven't gone through what you've gone through yet. And they're going to need that skill set. They're going to need that mindset to get to where you are. Even if you're not the greatest at something, if you've done anything that's better than where they are, they could use you to help. Like they could use your knowledge. They could use your experience to help them. So that can become your brand. That can become what you focus on. I think of, as I was talking, I was thinking of one of my clients. She's actually freaking amazing at damn near everything she does. So she is arguably the greatest in certain ways. If you look at, if she knows who she is, as I'm talking about her, I think that's going to be okay. So she's a powerlifter. She set some crazy good records, and she's also done really well in some other sports as well. If I think about that for her, she is great at many things. Is she the greatest at any one individual thing? Arguably no. We don't have an all-time world record for all weight classes in all conditions and da-da-da-da-da. She has some really good records, but she doesn't have that. So she's up at the mountain, she's in the top 1%, but she's not that 0.1%, right? So she might think, okay, well, if I'm not that 0.1, what can I do? Like, how can I teach people? Well, she's freaking awesome. But what has made her awesome is consistency. So even with having a family life, even with having multiple jobs, even with having the chaos of just what happens in life over 10 plus years, she's been consistent with training and she's been consistent with nutrition. Has she been perfect with either one of those? Hell no. No one has. But she's been consistent enough to go from a good athlete to a great athlete, and from a great athlete to a freaking elite athlete. So what she can focus on is, hey, mothers, if you want to be able to prioritize your health, but you still have family and kids and things, these are the things I do to make sure I get my food in. These are the things I do to make sure I get my training in. When I make a mistake in this way, this is the adjustment I make. When I make a mistake in this way, this is the adjustment I make. And then that's what she's going to present in her social media content, and that could be her brand. I am a really great athlete. I'm an elite athlete, but I'm still a mom. I'm still somebody who has multiple jobs. I'm still somebody who has to endure the chaos and craziness of life. And in those ways, I can relate to you. But by being the great elite athlete, I can also show you somebody that you want to be. So in some ways, I am you, and in some ways, I'm the future you. Here are the things that I do that have gotten me to where I am. So if you do these things, you can get closer to where I am. That would be a great way to position yourself in business, is to say, these are the ways I relate to you. These are the ways that I have maybe achieved something that you have yet to achieve. And then this is what I did to get there. If you can present this is what I did to get there part as a service, as a product, that can become your brand. And that can become how you not only make money, but how you actually give back to the world and help people. And that is going to give you a much more satisfying feeling than just making money. Money is nice and fun and helps with a lot of things. But being able to make the money while helping people is just the best of the best, right? So that's the balance we want. So that would be my feedback, is think of what you've done in your life that has grown you as a person. And then think of how you can use what you've grown through, the skills you developed, the mindset you developed, to teach that to others so they can grow in a similar way. Cool. Okay, I think that's everything. So we covered all the questions. And again, if you have any questions, if you want to be able to submit them for the Q&A, you can join our Patreon community. It's, again, patreon.com/C3 method. The 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method. You can also visit us on our website at c3method.com. You can reach out at my email, which is c3method@gmail.com. Whatever you need, however you need it, I hope you reach out so you can get it. There you go. Well, as always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.